Hey, what's up guys, it's Disturbed, and today I'm going to be talking about the very best talents you can get on your guns to increase your damage output, and comparing each and every single talent logistically to determine which is the absolute best. This video is going to be focusing on PvE, so if you're wondering which talents are the best for PvP, I made a video on that last night, so a link will be in the description to that, and I'll put an annotation on the video if you're interested in seeing that, but without further ado, let's get right into it. So first off, what I'm going to do is take a look at every single talent that has the ability to provide extra damage, talk about how good it can be, and if it has the potential to be one of the best talents. Firstly, we have Prepared, which gives you an extra 14% damage to targets that are more than 40 meters away from you. This talent sounds like it can be pretty good, but honestly, you're almost never more than 40 meters away from your target. To put it into perspective, the target dummy at the very back in the base of operations in the shooting range is 28 meters away. So your target would have to be 12 meters further than that so that you could even benefit from Prepared, which pretty much will never happen. The only instance where I can see this actually being helpful is when you're sniping in Falcon Lost. Otherwise, it's very rare that a target is more than 40 meters away from you. And one thing that confuses me about this talent is that you can get it on assault rifles, which is just weird as hell, because who in their right mind is going to shoot a target that's 40 meters away with an assault rifle? For one, that's already outside the optimal range of most ARs, and why wouldn't you just switch to an M1A at that range? Really weird that it's even an option to get it on assault rifle, but bottom line is that this talent is just pretty much complete garbage. Next, we have Ferocious, which increases your damage against elites and named NPCs by 14%, which is pretty much amazing considering that it's a flat out 14% damage, but I can't say that it's better than other talents in PvE and like put it on the list of which ones are the best, because this talent only does apply to elite enemies, so if you're fighting like purple enemies then it's completely pointless. Otherwise, it is one of the best talents. For the next talent, we have Unforgiving, which increases your damage depending upon how much health you have left over. In PvP, this talent can be pretty decent, but in PvE, it's pretty much trash. If you ever get to low health, the very last thing you're going to do is actually try to kill an NPC, because you'll probably just get one shot at it anyway, so the extra damage kind of goes to waste there. Like if you get low health, you either run away or you heal yourself to full instantly or something else like that. Very rarely will you actually get to half health and be in a position to kill an NPC where you won't just die instantly like getting one-shotted by a shotgun, so that extra damage is pretty much just useless in that situation. Next, we have Competent, which gives you more weapon damage after using a skill. This talent is pretty nice, but it's definitely not the best. You won't have like 100% uptime on it, and even if you somehow manage to always have it up, it really is only 13% weapon damage, which is pretty low compared to a few other talents. But nonetheless, it is still really good if you can manage to get it in the third slot and have it up pretty much all the time. For the next talent, we have Vicious, which increases your crit chance when you're at full health. This talent can be really nice in PvE because you're at full health a lot of the time, but honestly, you shouldn't really need the crit chance, because if somebody on your team is running a pulse with like 40% crit chance or even 30%, you'll probably be crit chance capped anyways, so it's pretty much just a complete waste of a talent. And it's pretty much the exact same story with Fierce. Even though that Fierce is there all the time, it's only 7% and you should be crit capped anyways, so kind of a wasted talent there. But if for some reason you don't have a max pulse on your team, then these talents can be a great substitute to that, but usually you'll have somebody with a really high pulse, and in that case these talents are pointless. Next, we have Brutal, which increases your headshot damage by 25%, which is absolutely one of the best talents that you can get. In PvE, landing headshots is extremely easy because NPCs don't really move around that much, and that extra headshot damage can help with your damage a bunch, but we'll get more into Brutal in a minute here. Next, there's Deadly, which increases your crit damage by 27%, which is an awesome flat out damage boost for PvE. Usually you'll be at crit chance cap with somebody using a pulse on your team, so stacking a bunch of crit damage can help you do a lot of damage, so Deadly is another great talent to have. Another good one is Responsive, which gives you an extra 14% damage to targets that are within 10 meters of you. In PvP, this talent is amazing, but against NPCs and stuff, it really isn't that great. Most of the time, you'll be fighting them from a distance, so you won't be benefiting from it all that often. But it still is a pretty nice talent to have for when shotgunners and stuff rush you. It's just that it's really not that dependable. And lastly, we have Destructive, which is my favorite talent by far, and it gives you an extra 19% armor destruction value. A lot of people don't really know about this talent, but it actually directly turns into enemy armor damage, which is additional flat damage that you do when fighting NPCs while their armor bar is up. This talent is fantastic because NPCs' armor bars usually equate for about 90 to 95% of their overall health pool, so you'll basically be getting extra 19% flat out damage up almost all the time, which is just a crap load of damage. So now that we've looked at every single talent and ruled out a few others, the contenders for the absolute best talent slot are Brutal, Deadly, and Destructive. I would put Responsive here, but it's just simply not better than these other talents, because for one, Destructive gives more than 14% damage, and on top of that, you won't have NPCs close to you 100% of the time, so it's definitely not as good as these three are. So first, let's compare Brutal and Destructive. Brutal gives a flat 25% extra headshot damage, which is 6% more damage than Destructive, but Brutal is solely dependent on you yourself landing headshots, while Destructive is just flat out extra damage. Against NPCs, you might think that your headshot chance is actually really high, but in reality it's somewhere closer around 50 to 60%, and that's being generous. It's virtually impossible to land only headshots unless you're on PC using a sniper. Otherwise, if you're on console using an assault rifle or something, you won't be landing like 80% headshot chance and 20% body shots. It'll be closer to around 50 or 60% headshot chance. So let's just say you're an average console player and your headshot chance is around 60%. So let's say that you shoot 10 bullets, and without any talents, each bullet deals 100 damage. So once you have Brutal on, your bullets get amped up by 25%, making them do 125 damage each bullet. But since your headshot chance is prospected to be around 60%, that would mean that only 6 out of the 10 bullets you shoot would do 125 damage. So 6 bullets would deal 125 damage, while the other 4 deal the base 100 damage, netting you a total of 1150 damage. The reason that I did this equation is so that I compare Brutal to Destructive evenly with math, just so that it's a lot easier to actually compare it. So now let's just take a quick look at Destructive. So with Destructive you get an extra 19% enemy armor damage, which directly correlates to flat out damage, but this will only work if the enemy has their armor bar up, otherwise you won't be getting any extra damage. So against NPCs, I would say that this bonus is up roughly like 90% of the time. I have no hard evidence on how much NPCs armor bars account for their health pool, but just from experience and playing the game, I'm going to say it's somewhere between 90 to 95%. I have no actual way of getting this info, so that's why I'm making assumptions, just thought I'd make that clear. Alright, so let's use the exact same equation that I did with Brutal. So let's say I shoot 10 bullets and 9 out of 10 of them are affected by the extra 19% damage from Destructive, because 90% of an enemy's health pool is going to be armor, and then the rest of it is going to be health. Usually if you put a full mag into an enemy, it won't take down their full armor. But just for the sake of it, let's just say that it's 90% and then the other 10% is just their flat damage. Alright, so with the extra 19%, that would make 9 bullets deal 119 damage, while the other 1 bullet deals only the 100 base damage, netting me a total of 1171 damage. So with that being said, Destructive got 21 more damage than Brutal, making it better by only a fraction. But that's only if you're using an assault rifle. If you have like really good aim with an M1A or something else like that, and have closer to a 70 or 80% headshot chance, that will immediately make Brutal better than Destructive. But if you're using an assault rifle or any other full auto gun, Destructive is better hands down. So now that we've determined that Destructive is better on fully auto weapons, let's compare it to Deadly. So with Deadly, let's assume that you have 60% crit chance, which is the cap, to fully take advantage of the extra damage. So we'll do the same exact formula. You shoot 10 bullets, 6 of them deal 128 damage, while the other 4 deal 100 damage, netting you a total of 1168 damage, which is only 3 shy from Destructive. So again, Destructive is better, but by only a hair. So moral of the story is that Destructive is king for fully autos by only a tiny amount, and Brutal is probably the best for snipers, while Deadly is 3rd place for snipers. But Deadly is probably better than Brutal by only a little bit if you're using a fully auto gun, and given that you actually have like crit chance cap and whatnot. But all in all, these talents are actually really balanced with each other, which is quite surprising considering the game is like generally horribly imbalanced. So, you know, props are massive on that one. But just to reiterate, for fully autos, Destructive is number 1, Deadly is 2nd if you have crit cap, and Brutal is 3rd, and Competent and Responsive tie for 4th because it depends on the individual skill power, exactly what they're doing, etc. But generally speaking, I'd say Responsive is probably a little bit better. If you did watch my video on PvP, I did say that Responsive is better than Deadly, and that's because in PvP you're constantly within 10 meters of somebody, but in a PvE environment that's hardly the case, so that's why Deadly is better. But just to quickly mention Ferocious, I would say that it's probably better than both Competent and Responsive when fighting against elite enemies. But like I said before, I can't put it on the list because it only works against elite NPCs. But if you are doing like a heroic incursion or something where there is only elite enemies, Ferocious is much better than Responsive and Competent because it's just flat out damage, it doesn't rely on anything. Another quick thing to note, like I said before, if you are using like a sniper and you have really good aim, Brutal is probably going to be better than Destructive, but only by a tiny amount, so like you could switch them out and probably not really notice much of a difference, but just for the sake of it, Brutal is probably a little bit better on a sniper. So, now that we've established that Destructive is the best talent for PvE in terms of damage, let's see how much this will really affect your damage by having it on. So like I said before, enemy armor damage works as flat out damage, so it calculates all of your damage, it adds in your crit damage, your headshot damage, all of that stuff, and then it basically amplifies it by how much enemy armor damage you have, and in this case, with Destructive, you're getting an extra 19%. So how much extra damage per second or DPS will this talent actually give you? It really does depend on your gear, but it basically amplifies it by a flat out 19%, and in my case, my DPS on the screen, which, you know, by the way, is completely broken, I explained that in a previous video, but just for the sake of it, on the screen, it says that my character DPS is 249,000. So if I were to multiply this number by 19%, that would give me an extra 48,000 damage per second, which is just insane. Again, the DPS statistic shown on the screen is horribly incorrect, and my DPS is way higher than that. So if I were to do the math and calculate my real DPS, the extra I would be getting from Destructive would be way higher. But just for the sake of it, like I said, we'll just say that it's 48k. Just note that it's probably much higher than that. One thing to note though is that if you do put on Destructive on your gun, it won't actually make your character screen DPS go up by 48,000 or whatever 19% of your DPS would be, because the game doesn't actually take enemy armor damage into account when calculating your DPS, but I guarantee you are getting that much extra damage per second while having this talent on. So yeah guys, that's pretty much it. My goal of this video was to prove to everyone that Destructive is an amazing talent, if not the very best talent in PvE, because a lot of people don't really know much about it and generally think of Deadly or Brutal being much better and kind of look past Destructive. So I hope that I accomplished that with this video and that this talent becomes a much more sought after thing for PvE build. But in conclusion, Brutal, Deadly, and Destructive are all amazing talents for PvE, and definitely make sure to get a gun with at least 2 of these talents on it so that you can just melt the shit out of NPCs. Anyways guys, that's going to do it for me. If you enjoyed, please make sure to drop a like on this video, as it did take me a really long time to make. Follow me on Twitter so you can ask me any questions you want, and subscribe for videos similar to this one. I'll see you later guys.